everyone, how are you doing? Good to see you again. This is Ann Lensley from Houston, Texas, and we are here today to talk about AP Human Geography. I hope everyone's had a good day and have thought about what we did yesterday, and I am going to get my screen up here for you, and we are going to get started. And there we go. All right. All right, so we will have the Slido open for you today. It's slido.com. T851 is our room number. However, it will not be open until the last 15 minutes. And I really encourage you to keep your questions directed at what we're talking about today, either the exam questions or last minute logistics, so that we can get your questions answered. Anything else will be filtered out. So just kind of keep that in mind. We don't want to sabotage somebody else trying to get a really necessary question answered for something that's already been covered. And do keep in mind, this is our second week of looking at just the exam logistics and also doing the mock exam. So if this is your first time to tune in, you really might do yourself a favor if you go back and look at everything from last week that started to deal with just the logistics of the exam. But you know what? You really should go back and look at all the stuff about the whole course itself in case you have kind of been checked out of what's going on and realize that Tuesday we have a test. So with that in mind, I want to remind you again, the structure of our exam to a 25-minute question and a 15-minute question. And they will have stimulus on them, and they will also be multi-part questions. And within those questions, you're going to be asked one of these three task verbs on each one of those internal questions. A describe, which is asking you to give a detailed account including reasons and causes. The way I describe it to my students is, what is it? Tell me what it is, okay? Explain is the other topic, the other task verb. Explain is asking for a detailed account, including reasons or causes. Examples. What is explain the concept, explain what you see, what are the patterns, what is going on, and then support that with information that's either from the prompt itself or from the stimulus or from the explanation on the concept, which may require a real world example. And don't hesitate to give that example. You always want to remember, you can't give too much. You can give too little, but you can't always give too much. And the reason I say that is because this is a points awarded system. And so you're only going to lose points if you don't have enough. So if you're not real certain, make sure you have done what is it, why is it, because, and apply it in terms of explain. Okay. Now compare of the three task verbs, compare is the more challenging one here. And compare asks you to give an account of either the similarities or the differences. And you're looking at two different aspects of it. I'm going to show you that here in a few minutes, but this requires a parallel comparison. That means you're looking at the same thing in a different relationship or in a different spatial area. So what is it and how is it the same in the two different contexts? So you have describe, explain, and compare. Don't dismiss those, y'all. Make sure you understand how to write questions on these. I went over these this morning with my own students, and they've had them all year long. All right, so once again, I'm going to remind you, because somebody sent me an email and asked me what a stimuli was. These are examples. It is something that is graphically oriented or map or data about geography. Remember, geography is a spatial subject, so it's about how data fills a space and then how we're going to interpret that. So all kinds of different ways that can happen. And do keep in mind, our exam is in black and white, so you're not going to see something in a colored scale, so don't worry about that. All right. So we had, our purpose today is to look at our questions that we had from yesterday, the mock exam yesterday. And I also want to point out something that I had heard that somebody was concerned that, let me go back. That somebody was concerned that this clock only went for the entire time. This clock does not, let me say, this clock will go for 30 minutes because that includes 25 minutes to write your question and then 5 minutes to upload. But look what happens. Everyone, look up here, get your head out of your cell phone, look up here. See, as soon as you get to 5 minutes remaining time, it turns red. And then the top of it tells you that's how much time is left to submit your work. So this very much counts down the 25 minutes and then turns red to get your attention that that's how much time you have left to submit. So I had heard reference that it was a whole 30 minutes. No, it's 25 minutes to write and 5 minutes to upload. And you need to be careful when you get into that 5-minute time period, because you can't afford to be writing over it and into that time period where you have to upload it, particularly those of you who have to take a picture of it and then send it to the device to upload. I hope that that's clarifies some questions that had come up. All right, so when we look at yesterday's question, one of the things I also wanted to point out was the concern that I've also heard that it's only on one particular unit, there's nothing that overlaps. No, y'all, we don't do this anymore in this course. These topics on our free response questions, including the modified ones this year, incorporate topics in multiple units. And so the ones that I gave you yesterday, in unit 1, thinking geographically, we have 3 different topic areas that question overlapped. And then it also overlapped with 2 different areas in the agriculture unit, of which those particular agricultural questions have about 5 different objective areas. So they're really big topic units. In addition to that, the overarching ideas that happen throughout the entire course also are brought in. And we have 2 of those: consequence, looking at impacts, and then also spatial organization reflected by the patterns that we see in the 2 different maps. Additionally to that, we have 4 different levels of skills that are brought into just this one question. And so I bring this up because I am concerned that the idea that it's only coming out of one unit or one chapter out of a textbook and nothing overlaps, that is not a good approach at all. You have to allow your mind to see the bigger picture of this, that all of these units are part of an overlapping puzzle that eventually all comes together at this time of the year. So let's look at the question. I've taken each of the questions and put them together with some sample answers. And shout out to Claire in Iowa, and Paul G, you didn't tell me where you're from, and Alexander in Virginia, and Ching Yang and Nick here in Bel Air for jumping up to the plate really fast, doing these answers for me last night because I wanted sample answers from some students. Thanks guys for stepping up and doing this. And here's the feedback on your answers. You're going to see them without names, of course, but I'm betting the 5 of you are going to recognize some of your answers here. So I've put in here examples of answers that answered the questions, nailed it without a doubt, no discrepancy here, so that you can see what a good solid answer looks like, not only following what the task verb wants, but also what the answer is expecting. So in the very first one, it's looking at scale of analysis of map A. The scale of analysis of map A is at the county scale. So map A, once again, is the United States, but the data is at the county level, not the state or the whole country. It is a US map. The scale of analysis is at the county scale. The map shows the whole United States, but each county has its own corresponding data, okay? In comparison, this is a compare question. In comparison, map B shows the food desert problem within a county at a local scale. Y'all, that's beautiful. And then the student goes on to say that it splits the county into different regions and compares the income level of the population at those regions to their food accessibility. So not only have we compared it, we've compared this, we've dealt with the scale of analysis in terms of the data, we've dealt with the 2 maps, and now we are closing our thought. We are taking our thought and we are linking it back to the question, and as well as back to this whole topic of food deserts. So compares the income level of the population of or at those regions to their food accessibility. Okay, we see the same thing in this one. Map A is displayed at a national scale. You can go on and read it. Map B is displayed at a local scale. It gives more insight to the varying conditions surrounding food deserts in different parts of one specific county as opposed to the county as a whole. All right. Another perfect answer. The only thing I would make it even more perfect is to link it back to even more solid back to food deserts, but still nails the question. All right, in question B, you were asking to explain why food deserts in the U.S. Why map A does not adequately depict the problems of food deserts. So once again, map A is the one of the entire United States divided by counties. Okay, so nailed it once again. Food deserts depicts the problems with food deserts because food deserts primarily affect a local area, meaning certain neighborhoods. Now that data was in the form of census tracts, but it didn't say census tracts on it. So it did say it, I think, in the prompt, but you could say anything that's local would work here and would be acceptable. So in order to properly analyze which neighborhoods, towns are affected by food deserts, one has to investigate the local scale. So they're explaining why this is happening. And they'd have to investigate the local scale because they would see more individual neighborhoods and places and how badly affected they are compared to others in the same region. And then the student goes on again to address the scale. So they are explaining why map A at that scale is not addressing the information about the data that we need to see. All right. In number C, we're explaining one spatial pattern suggested by the distribution of food deserts in Harris County. It doesn't matter that you don't know where this is, okay? It doesn't matter, even though in the original map, I did draw an arrow from South Texas over here to Harris County. The fact that Houston is in part of it is irrelevant. What you are supposed to do is to read and look at the pattern of that data. So you are looking at this spatial pattern of how this data is in this county, okay? And I could have used any counties, but the pattern here actually was an interesting pattern because of what is left out. So let's go to their answer. In their answer, we have two different approaches to this answer. The first one, the student has looked at the legend and also read the prompt. And in the prompt, it defined low income and how much percentage of the population is actually in low income that qualifies as a food desert. So this student particularly said low income houses can be found in the north, south, and eastern areas of the county since the food deserts are primarily located in that area, okay? So then they go on to say, because there are few food deserts to the left, which is the west of downtown Houston, it can be inferred that there are more high income houses in that region of the county. So we have talked about the spatial pattern, the eastern and the northern side, and then we are indicating what the western side is showing. And we are associating this with what the prompt and the legend both have, low income houses. So those two sentences right there really answer this question well, okay? In part D, you were asked to explain one social consequence of living in a food desert. So social consequences, that requires us to then think about how hopefully your teacher organized things for you along the idea of economic, political, social, and environmental, and start looking at, okay, what is just social? So in this case, we would be looking at things that would be demographic related. We would be looking at things that are healthcare, things that directly affect a person, okay? And one of the easier ones that a lot of people associate with would be either health conditions, housing conditions, employment conditions. Another one is crime conditions. So in this one, all of the answers said that social consequence of living in a food desert is the widespread use of fast food restaurants or corner stores, which leads to higher risk of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease in these communities, and linking it back as the only readily available food is unhealthy. So this is your social consequence, okay? That's perfect answer. I would expect to see most answers along that lines. But other possible answers can be associated with income levels, perhaps increases in crime. Um, also, another good one is access, the impact on education, because if you don't have a balanced diet, proper nutrition, it can affect your ability to concentrate in schools and academic abilities. So that would be another really good one to get on part D. All right. In part E, we're looking at a solution. So now we the concept of predicting for the future. Describe one solution to ease the burden of residents living in food deserts, something to ease their burden. So what could you possibly think of that would make it easier for them in that food desert to obtain quality food? Okay. So one of the ways is to have better access to public transportation. Notice this says describe. So that doesn't mean you're having to provide all of the solution. You're having to tell me what it is. You don't have to do more, although this student definitely does that. Have better access to public transportation because it can ensure that people are able to travel to different locations in order to purchase healthy food and fresh produce. Nails it. Beautiful answer. Another response, weekly farmers markets that sell fresh produce, way to alleviate some issues with food deserts. And goes on to say that way people living in food deserts are able to purchase some vegetables and fruits to eat for at least part of the week, enabling them to have healthier diets, da 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 da. And in here also, they talked about how it would be less expensive. So this is another option because you are cutting out the middleman in this, and it's coming straight from the farm to the table, which is what you're actually seeing happening in some places right now because of the breakdown in some of the processing elements, bringing in the fresh foods. Okay, we went through that pretty fast. The last one is describe one political and one environmental reason for food insecurity in a country. Now, in the event that you would see something that has two parts in it, I would strongly encourage you to address one part and don't forget about the other part and address the second part. Don't forget that just because you address one, you didn't address the other one, particularly when it says and. Okay, be real careful. One political, one environmental. So this student actually reversed. I guess they did the environmental was easier, so they did that one first. So environmental factors that could cause food insecurity. Well, drought for one, continual seasons of drought results in famines, and that's actually a major cause of migration. So food insecurity definitely caused by drought during the growing season is definitely an environmental reason, and which in turn results in famine. You might come up with other things like flooding, sea level rise, and flooding fields in some areas. Also, destruction as a result of fire, forest fires or prairie fires can also cause some problems, at least in the short term. Too much, the climate change enough creates differences in heating or in cooling, and that can also impact your food security. All right, also this student brought in commercial farmers. Commercial farming itself does not allow one to provide food for themselves. So that was interesting, although it doesn't relate really to environmental at all, but I thought it was an interesting comment. All right, so then we go to political. Political conflict with one country that exports food to it, because the country that exports food could execute a trade embargo, starving the importing country of resources needed to feed the population. So this question is a describe. So you do not have to necessarily use an example, and this student did not. Now, if it said explain, I would definitely put in here an example of where something like this has happened. So you can have governments can have ineffective distribution systems, failing infrastructure to move food around to different countries. Countries can also have civil wars, which cause problems. We have Sudan and South Sudan as examples of that. Somalia is another example. We have the conflict between the US and China right now, North Korea and the rest of the world almost. These can all become factors as to what would create food insecurity. So trade embargoes, tariffs, internal problems, There's a lot of different possibilities that you could have used. All right. So sample two question two works the same way as question one, except for question two is 15 minutes with another 5 minutes to submit. And once again, that clock is going to run down all the way down. And once it hits 5 minutes, it's going to turn red and tell you it's time to wrap it up and get it done and submit it. And we are done. In this particular question, you had a couple fewer fewer questions than what you had because it's 10 minutes shorter. Once again, this particular question overlapped between two different units, three different skill areas, and all three of the big ideas that are overarching for this course. Notice that your prompt here, your stimuli, you have a single stimuli, and it too is a black and white image. You won't have color images. Everything will be black and white grayscale. You also have a prompt. Your prompt in here does tell you that as Arctic sea ice continues to decline, exposing uncharted lands, which may lead to future geopolitical challenges. I encourage you to remember that, because then we have down here, explain the political impact of continued melting of sea ice in the Arctic region. I know our favorite thing for a lot of people is not to read, although it's a fabulous world in your mind when you read. But the thing is that if you don't read these, you may be cutting yourself out of answering a question, or at least finishing it. So make sure you look at the prompt. Make sure you read the things on the map. I think I've been saying that now for 7 weeks. Okay, so the first question is a describe question. Describe the significance of the 200 nautical mile limit of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas. So hopefully you covered this. I know we covered it in the online stuff. It was also should have been covered in your political unit. The additional information that you would have needed to have known or had in your notes about maritime boundaries is that the 200 nautical mile limit is actually an exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. And so what is the control that the country with that EEZ has? What kind of control do they have? Well, that contributes to describing the significance here. And so nailed this question once again. The countries have special rights regarding natural resource extraction, exploration. You can read the rest of this, For example, a country is allowed to exclude foreign ships from participating in any fishing activities within the EEZ, okay? So they've described what this EEZ is, okay? Perfect answer. All right, now here's a little interesting little trick. So the question asks you, using an applicable example, explain the role of a supranational organization in the Arctic region. So you have to be in this region. You have to know what a supranational organization is. You're going to explain it. What am I doing with this part? Using an applicable example. Can you think of another word for applicable example? How about the word identify? All right. I'm not saying identify is a verb on here at all. I'm leading you to, I'm asking you to explain this, and I'm telling you, give me an example. That is what is meant by apply. Give me an example that supports what you are explaining. Okay, so an example of a supranational organization in the Arctic region is the Arctic Council, which, and here is its role, serve to promote cooperation between Arctic nations, preserve biodiversity, implement sustainable development practices in the region. That's exactly what we gave you when we went over what this was, or I did actually, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, okay? There are 3 different supranational organizations that you could have cited here. You could have cited NATO. You could have cited, obviously, the Arctic Council. And you could have cited the United Nations. Any one of those would have been factors here in the Arctic region, and you would have just needed to have then explained their role. Okay, so this is just be careful with some of the wording, and once again, it's an explain, so I would always use an example. Here you were told to use an example. All right, once again, explain the political impact of continued melting of sea ice in the Arctic region. What is the political impact of melting sea ice? So here we're explaining that as this melts, different countries could lay claim to this land as a result and create land ownership disputes. as well as disputes over the extraction of any natural resources. So we are explaining everything that is happening here. And then the student closes the answer by continuing to say, overall results in geopolitical conflicts and possibly even war as countries compete for sovereignty over these regions. So they are addressing completely the what is happening as a result of, the consequences as a result of, and what may happen coming out of that. Excellent answer. Another option on that, the political impact flares tensions between competing Arctic countries that compete for new resources and land made accessible by the receding sea ice. For example, Russia contesting claims in the Arctic region with Denmark, inflaming tensions between the two countries and leading to the formation of supranational organization. So excellent, excellent answers. Okay. All right, the global impact, the global economic impact. So now we've changed our mental scale. The ice is melting in the Arctic region, but now we're looking at what is happening as that ice is melting. We're not looking at the causes of the melting of ice. I didn't ask you about that. I asked you about what is going to happen in an economic perspective as a result of that sea ice melting. At the global level, so across the entire world, what may happen economically, okay? So we look at the student here, as a result of melting sea ice would be the influx of natural resources affecting global trade of fossil fuels. So they're looking at the global cost of a barrel of oil or natural gas. What will happen if you have an influx of more supply? I can't imagine that's going to go down any lower. It's already killing us down here in Houston. So if that happens on a global scale, we have more in supply, it's going to affect the global economic development and funding or financing in these countries that when it's based upon oil and gas. Okay. Another approach to answering this can affect the tourism industries of many countries that are known for their beaches. And so they may become inaccessible with gradual flooding. More importantly, harbors that serve as important break of bulk points may see some issues with rising sea levels, and land upon which the docks and storage facilities are built could eventually be overtaken, seriously affecting global shipping trade. So we are linking a impact caused by the melting sea ice through tourism and through shipping, affecting the global shipping trade. Okay, you get that? Those are, it's a little tricky, but also I want you to keep in mind, there's that word economic, you know, that's in unit 7, and it's mentioned 36 times in units 1 through 5. And here is an example. All right, well, that was question 1 and question 2. And if you have any questions about something that didn't quite make sense, go back and slow down the video and look at it again, or send us a question. That line is going to be open here coming up pretty soon. So for one very last time, y'all, just what is AP Human Geography? Just what is it? This was a course that your teachers diligently and passionately taught you, the systematic study of patterns and processes that shape our understanding and our use and alteration of the Earth's surface. They asked you to look at this in terms of these big ideas of patterns and consequences caused from impacts, and then spatial processes. How do we occupy space, and how does that space and the data that becomes part of that space change society? How does it change who we are, and what are the consequences? What are the environmental consequences in particular? These reach over the entire course, every single unit, multiple times. These are big abstract themes. So we approached this course with you through these various levels of skills. And these skills we've really touched on a lot here with the review process, because we needed to make sure that you reshaped how you looked at this content, because you had so much content, we know that. But then we have to re-examine how we look at that content that you may have just memorized and apply it in different ways. And so that's what our spatial relationships is looking at, our data analysis, our source analysis, and then our scale analysis. And keep in mind that as you go through these skills, they scaffold, they become harder and harder as you get to the part D's and E's. And if these were never given to you, I encourage you, go back and pull up the video and freeze frame it, take a picture of it, look at these. But these are things that Ms. Brandt and I have been talking about for the last 7 weeks. And we've been showing you different examples of how these have worked throughout the course of all of the units and the data that we've been dealing with. All right, so if we look at checking for our understanding of this entire course, a system study of patterns and processes of how human society is organized and looking at the complex relationships of cause and effect, this spatial perspective and how it relates to one another, between places, within places, cause and effect of events and actions by people and by non-entities within a place, to look at human organization and environmental consequences. Okay. All right. So once again, this is our last shot to have us get you to understand what you're doing for the exam on the 12th. So did you get organized? I showed you this slide last week, and I asked you, it's time to start thinking about getting organized, because this exam is coming up really fast on Tuesday. And some of you, if you're like my students, you've got American history and you got calculus, and that's stressing enough. There's no need to be stressed if we plan ahead, be organized. Okay. So have you reviewed your contact information? We asked you to look and see, do you have your information coming from College Board? If not, have you gone in and looked for it? Have you done this? Have you done this? Don't make your mom be the one saying, well, why didn't you do this? Have you done this? Get it taken care of ahead of time. You'll feel a lot better. You'll sleep so much better. All right, on Sunday is 2 days before we take the exam. And on Sunday, you should be receiving your e-ticket for your Tuesday exams. Now, if you have exam on Monday, you get it on Saturday. So on Sunday, you should have this. So log into your email, look for it to arrive. If it doesn't arrive by Monday, instead of freaking out, I would go to your myap.collegeboard.org site and make sure you can see your ticket right there and bookmark it, do whatever you need to do to make sure you can access it 30 minutes before when we start on Tuesday. Did you address the exam day checklist? Did you print it out, or did you at least save it on your computer? Did you get all this information in here, your AP ID number, the name of your exam? Did you do all this, including in putting in the exact time that it starts? Have you looked it up? Where are you? I'm not going to tell you any times because I'm in a different time zone than some of you, and I don't want to mess anything up. But you need to look at your time zones. If you're over there in Spain, you're taking this exam at 8 p.m. Okay, that's not here. All right, so practice makes perfect. Y'all, hey, this was 4 days ago. Today's May 7th. This was 4 days ago. Have you done this? Have you done this? Let's do this now. Okay, get this done. All right, ultimately, get yourself organized. Here's a file folder. Put your files in that folder that you think you're going to need. Make sure you homestead that power cable and keep it away from everyone else. Make sure you don't lose where you put it too. That power cable, you need that power cable to eliminate all possible problems, okay? Clean your place up. All right, 1 hour before that exam on Tuesday, you're gonna take some big deep breaths. You're gonna get a drink of water, get a water bottle, go to the bathroom, start programming everyone off so that you can just focus. You're just focusing. We're not panicking. Big deep breaths again. All right. So that when half hour before arrives, you can log in and see where you're going to need to go so that when it rolls to the magic top of the hour, your exam questions come and you are ready to go because you are going to rock it out. All right. Remember, we took you through very slowly how to do submitting of your work. If you don't click submit before the timer runs out, your response will not be able to be scored. Okay, we won't get it. You have to submit. And also, don't quit before you submit. Okay, don't quit. Don't restart, don't refresh, don't turn it off. Make sure you get this logo that says your AP exam is complete. Okay. All right, other important links. You can always scroll backwards and check on this, but other important links if you need to look up any kind of things. And tomorrow we're going to have a party and we're going to have an awesome gentleman join us from the State Department. This is the Chief Geographer of the United States of America. And we've been talking about all kinds of things all day long. He and I have about his presence with us tomorrow. You are in for a super big treat. And other teachers that know him know exactly what kind of a treat you are in for. And his resume and his bio, it reads like walking through our curriculum as it is. So this is going to be super awesome experience for you guys. And we'll say a last couple of words about the AP exam tomorrow. So make sure you start the weekend off geographically sound, and make sure you join us tomorrow with Dr. Lee Schwartz with the geographer of the United States of America from the U.S. Department of State. And this link, if you're going to use this link, you have to type it in. Well, you could just come here. He'll be here with us. But that's also the link for us tomorrow too. All right, so this is time to ask questions. We have a few minutes left to ask questions, and my trusty assistant, freshly finished all of his college final exams, is sitting here ready to feed me some questions so that I can answer your questions for you. William? All right, first question, which one? If we don't know the meaning of a term in a question, can we Google it? Yes, you can Google it, but watch out, don't take too much time. Question 1, could an environmental reason be living in an arid location with less arable land? But that's going to be desertification would be your environmental factor here. But yes, that would be a factor as well. Can you zoom into maps? Yes, you should be able to zoom into maps if you need to. You probably won't need to. How do you format a question that has 3 subparts? Question 1, A, and then go B, then go C, then go D. Please enumerate so that we know what you're writing. That's crucial. I told my students this morning also spread it out 1.5 or 1.5 on spacing, but that's not a requirement. It's just I fuss at my kids about making something readable for the person who's reading it. And when you cram it all together, it's hard to read it, but those are technicalities that you may not have time to worry about. If we don't know the meaning of, yes, I've already answered that. Is an example always required when we are prompted to explain? It's not always. You have to look at what the question is asking you. If it's explaining, if in some contexts, it could be asking you to explain a concept where an example doesn't work. But if there's possibility to get an example in there, I always tell my students, put an example in there. Why? Because apply. Why? Because apply. Can you receive partial credit on a part of an FRQ? That's a good question. We've never talked about scoring. So yes, each portion of the FRQ, so say there's 4 parts. Example, there could be 4 parts. I don't know how many parts there are. But if there were 4 parts, each part is going to have a separate point value. And so if you don't finish, say it has 7 parts, okay? And you get parts 1 through 5 done and you don't get to 6 and 7, don't worry about it. You're still going to get scores for parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6 and 7 you won't. So don't worry about that. At this point, you guys, you just need to focus on answering something strong, geographically sound, and following those task verbs. If we copy notes from our class, but it matches a definition online, will it be flagged for plagiarism? Try to put it in your own words and don't copy anything. I got an API ID from the College Board already. Is this the one for the test? Yes, that is the one for the test. About how long should each of our answers be? You, I can't give you like, it should absolutely be 3 sentences or absolutely 4 sentences. You need to make sure you've addressed the task verb. You need to make sure that you've addressed what it's asking you to do. You need to make sure you've addressed the content of it. So in most cases, 3 sentences, 4 sentences, it depends on the question, y'all. It depends upon how you write. Some students are very concise writers. Some students write forever. Debaters tend to be very concise and get it all into 1 to 2 sentences. It's so unique for every single one of you. You have to do what you do best and make sure you take that question apart. That's the whole thing. No, 25 minutes is not a lot of time, but that is actually how long you have when we have a normal exam where we have 3 FRQs over the expanse of an hour. You have 60 minutes and 3 FRQs, and that divides out to 20 minutes each. So it's really still about the same amount of time. Should I manage my time so I don't, how should I manage my time so I don't feel rushed? Well, that was the whole point of doing the practice FRQs this week. That's the whole purpose of, trying to settle yourself, take a big deep breath and just do the best you can. That's all anyone asks you, just do the best you can. And that's it. It's not the end of the world if you don't. And all you can do, that's all you can do. Are we supposed to uninstall? Yes, you must uninstall, deactivate Grammarly. I don't have it. I had very rigid English teachers, so I never got to rely on a crutch. So yeah, you are supposed to disable Grammarly because it interferes with your operating, with the College Board stuff. If we write an answer and then we add something that is iffy, will our entire answer be disregarded? No. On AP exams, they are scored on a points awarded basis. So if you say what is correct, you get that point, okay? If you then contradict yourself, if you said what was correct first and you contradict yourself later, you still get those points. And teachers, we're not big fans of that, but that's the way it works. For question 1 of the first FRQ, could you have said that the scale is larger in map A than B? You had to provide more to it. That was a compare question. Yes, but that's like only barely a fourth of what you needed to have said for the entire answer. Is it okay to bold or underline important terms in your FRQ responses? It doesn't do anything for us as readers. We're not reading for word. I mean, we're not looking for spot checking words. We don't do that. We have to read every single word on your paper. So if it makes you feel better, go ahead, but we doesn't do anything for us. How many questions do you need to get right we don't know the data part. We leave that, all the readers, the reading leadership leaves that to all of those mathematician people who work in statistics and analysis. We don't deal with that. How do you format a question as 3 subparts? Sorry, I answered that like 5 minutes ago. So yeah, here's number 1, here's part A, here's part B, here's part C. You want whatever the enumeration is, however it's numbered on the exam, follow that same numbering. It doesn't matter how lenient or strict we are. We are all robots trained to a rubric. It's our motto is you become one with the rubric. That means you get through the reading so much better if you get that rubric understood really well. It has nothing to do with lenient or strict. You have to follow what the rubric is asking to have done. Could a political reason be a corrupt government not distributing food? Yes, that is definitely a reason. Is it okay? We said was a national map, but map B was a subnational. You need to be, there's more to that answer because the answer was asking about data. So that would not be a sufficient answer. In the final 5 minutes for submission, can we finish our final sentence or do we drop everything and submit? Finish your sentence, but don't spend, you can't afford to spend a lot of time finishing it, okay? It's got to hurry up and get finished and then get it done, because that 5 minutes, for those of you who are handwriting it, you have to photograph it and then get it uploaded. You've got a couple of extra processing steps there to think about than somebody who's just clicking and dragging it. And So I hate to tell you, go ahead and finish your entire thing because you're going to run out of time. And that's just additional stress that you don't need to have. So you need to practice everything and have this down. What would be your advice to learn real world examples if your teacher didn't use them that many during class? Well, you go and look them up as you go through these different concepts. But actually, if you go back through the videos that Miss Brandt and I did, there are some that are absolutely pointed out in the curriculum that we have to teach, and those were the ones that we actually demonstrated with when we were teaching those videos. So things like Sudan, and I can't remember them all, Russia. There's the others that were in there. I'm sorry, I've forgotten them off the top of my head. So, but if you go back into those videos that we've done here, I think in the last 3 weeks, I remember we had some. You can look at those examples. Those would be the ones that would be examples. Compare. No, you're not being asked to contrast. Is the question asking, does compare mean contrast too? No, this is just compare. We're not asking for contrast. What if the map is very blurry and we can't read it, which is what happened to me yesterday? The map won't be blurry. Sorry. The maps yesterday you could have pulled out of a Google Drive and they aren't blurry. They got blurrier because it was reduced. Can you talk about how the melting Arctic could lead to less reliance and therefore the destruction of the economy in Panama? You just have to cite all of that. What do you mean by the destruction of the economy? So I'm not going to answer this question that somebody chose to not only yell at me, but then also to cuss at me. So the gentleman that chose to do that, I'm not addressing that. All right. Google Docs has its own automatic grammar checker. Will that be a problem? No, I understand it is not a problem, but you got to have time to do it. And guys, don't anticipate having to do that. We can read through bad grammar. We can read through things that don't have capital letters. I mean, that won't be the first time. Would another economic impact for question 2, part D, be spending money on anti-flooding measures? Yes, that would be very valid. Can we use edit on Google Docs? Once again, I don't think you're going to have time. Don't anticipate those crutches, please. Can we sign in like 45 minutes or an hour before the exam? My understanding is only open 30 minutes before and the exam will pop up. So stick with the 30 minutes, be at your computer an hour before, okay? Be just, making sure your chair is comfortable, making sure you have everything, okay? Just don't just show up 30 minutes right before and start getting on it, plan ahead of time. I sit down for doing these at 2:30 and I don't go live until 4. So it works. Okay. Do I have to write both the similarities and differences for compare? No, compare is just comparing the same things. It's a parallel structure. So it's the same thing in a different scenario or in a different context or in a different spatial area. An FRQ, if I have the right idea and I'm explaining the answer correctly but not using the correct terminology, will that answer count? It depends upon, it really depends on, it really depends upon how the question is asking for the information to be provided, okay? No, Ms. Brandt and I are not creating a big Kahoot for all the units. Those, you can go to Kahoot and do your own practice already. That's actually more fun in a smaller group. We have Dr. Schwartz with us tomorrow, and he is amazing. He is what happens after you take this course and move all the way through it and become a professional geographer. But you can suggest that to your teacher. Let them do an online. I'm doing an online one with my kids. I did that today with them. Are we graded? No, we're not graded on grammar. We don't know what the point structure is. We don't know how many sections they're going to be. You can use the spell check and the grammar check, but that's a waste of, it's not a good use of time, guys. It's not going to matter. I do want to make a comment because I caught this on one of my own students' papers he was typing. Be careful that you don't have a situation where, like, for example, county becomes the word country because the spell checker changed the word for you or you mistyped it. That was one of my students actually lost a point that he didn't get a point because it kept saying country through the whole thing when it was supposed to say county. So kind of be careful with that. Would decreased product prices be valid for economic effects of ice melt in the Arctic? Yes, it would be. So I think all of these questions are starting to repeat themselves. So I think we're going to go ahead and call it a wrap for today. And tomorrow we will be here. Miss Brandt will be here. Dr. Schwartz will be here. My son will be here moderating. Sal's going to be with us from College Board, and we are going to have a fabulous send-off and have you all ready. And if you still have questions, I bet those questions are answered at least in the last 3 weeks of our stuff, if not in the last 7 weeks. We've had a great course, y'all. It's been an interesting experience to do this way. I'm very proud of all of those that have sent me questions. And I've been able to respond to some of those students, both on Slido as well as those who went through a treasure hunt to find my email address. So anyway, thanks again to the 5 of you who helped me to get answers for this example today. And I want to thank you for watching. Always make sure you go out and explore your geography. And one of my most favorite comments comes from T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know that place for the first time. Okay. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow, and we will have a great last day. Bye.